Okay, it seems that I'm live, I hope. Let me throw this up onto Twitter, since I can't get it up onto Facebook just yet. Oh, I'm just sitting here, I'm talking because, well, I need to say something. Talking about today, going to be talking about George Soros and interference in the Canadian election of 2015. Except my computer doesn't like the way I spelled interference, so I'm going to fix that. This is some serious stuff. This is a serious allegation here, what we've got going on. Of course, now I've lost my Google Hangouts window. Oh, there it is. It was just hiding behind Chrome. Arg. And I can't seem to hop onto Facebook either right now, so you're stuck with me here. And, well, that's just the way it is. I just hope you can hear me. So we're going to check that thing. We're going to do a quick sound check, and then I'll be rolling. I find that the best way to do this is to check my own feed on my other computer. Haha. So here we go. I'm going to verify it in here by flipping on the other machine. And it's working. Yay. Okay, so we'll turn that off to avoid using up all the bandwidth. And we're rolling. Okay, hello, everybody. I am Stephen Britton. I am live. I am here on the old Google Hangout thing. I'm doing different, I'm experimenting with different ideas and ways of getting my video cast online, simply because I am very unhappy with the quality of the video feed that I'm receiving or sending out. So you're going to have to bear with me while I try different options and different ideas as to the way I can get a decent signal and video feed out without upgrading all the technology and spending a bunch of money that I simply don't have right now. With that being said, let's just get her done here. So, hello everybody. I am Stephen Britton here on my Wednesday daily show, which doesn't happen daily. It happens 3 times a week. So we'll call it tri-weekly. How about that? People get confused when you say things like bi-weekly or tri-weekly, because it can mean one of two things. It can either mean 2 times a week or once every 2 weeks. Well, I'm going to say tri-weekly, and let's define tri-weekly to mean 3 times a week. If we can all agree on that, we're good to go. So with that said, I'm going to jump right in here. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that that have been happening with regards to the Canadian federal election of 2015. There's been a new complaint filed with Elections Canada, and I'll bring up the screenshots of this, or I'll bring up the actual web page because I've got a live screen. I've got a live feed for screen sharing here. So we'll bring up the thing here. Let's do that. Okay, so what you can see here is you can now see my camera screen. You can see, and I don't like that, so we're going to do it slightly differently. We're going to do this. Application window, that, bang, do that, and there. Okay, so what I have here is a I have the application window up of Google of my web browser, which I use Google Chrome, just in case anyone's wondering. And what we can see here is, you can see me moving around. This is a new report which is alleging outside influence in the Canadian election of 2015. And it's a complaint by a group here in Canada, which is it's a 36-page report, which was sent to the federal election body which oversees and manages federal elections in Canada, called Elections Canada. Very imaginative name, you know. I would not have come up with something different, but heck, it doesn't really matter what you name the organization, as long as it's completely nonpartisan and unbiased and does its job to make sure that elections are free, fair, and democratic. And man, do I hate the way ads get injected into the meat of the article here. So now the thing is, the Canadian Elections Act says, no person who does not reside in Canada shall, during an election period, in any way influence electors to vote or refrain from voting, or vote to refrain from voting for a particular candidate. In other words, if you don't live in Canada, unless you're a Canadian citizen, you're supposed to stay the hell out of it. Now, there's limits to this. Certainly, if you are outside of Canada and you are having a conversation with a Canadian citizen, and you say, well, I kind of think you should vote this way for this guy because I think this other guy's gonna really be bad for you. I think that's one thing. And I don't think anyone's really talking about that as being a way to influence an election. You're having a one-on-one conversation in the context of free speech. What I think this is, the spirit of this law is, it's referring to foreign third parties, and just adjusting my microphone here, foreign third party organizations spending lots of money. You see, it talks about that right here. Spending lots of money to influence the federal election. And the issues here is there was a group called Vote Together, a campaign called Vote Together, which targeted 29 conservatives. Funny that it's always the left-wing organizations that are willing to do anything, whether it's ethical or not, to influence a federal election. But Vote Together was a campaign through a group called Lead Now. And guess who Lead Now is backed by? This guy, George Soros. He's a Hungarian. I think he's Hungarian. He's a so-called philanthropist. And he funds all these very, very left-wing, social justice-oriented organizations. And he gives them billions of dollars around the world to conduct campaigns to influence elections. And there's all kinds of hints. And if you follow the money, and there's another group called MoveOn.org, for example. And if you look at Move On, their purpose is to raise millions of dollars for liberal candidates, and has been known to refer to compare your political opposition, as it says right here, to Hitler. Like, this is the type of thing that we have to deal with now. So Soros is known to be backing organizations such of these, and it just goes round. And here is a wonderful photograph of Justin Trudeau meeting with George Soros. So it just shows that Soros and Trudeau are definitely good friends, and well, at least they're acquaintances, and they're known to each other, and they've been working together in some way. But this goes even beyond that, because the question is, at this point, is this the right thing? And was the Canadian election influenced through foreign money? If it was, that is indicative of the extreme ends that the liberal left will go to in order to get their way, which means up to and including election fraud, because this is a form of election fraud. That means, because we know that the Liberal Party of Canada is the beneficiary of this, and we know that George Soros and Justin Trudeau have some kind of relationship, that implies that the Liberal Party of Canada is in some way complicit in this. And it's very funny here that Tides Foundation and Lead Now representatives are refusing to return phone calls from the media because they don't want to talk to us. And make no mistake, this was about one thing and one thing only, and that was getting rid of Stephen Harper. Probably the best prime minister this country has ever seen, because he wasn't doing what they wanted him to do. And make no mistake, this is all about George Soros getting his way and having his hands in the bowl, in the pot, whatever, controlling governments around the world. Because remember this, he who has the gold, this is the other golden rule, he who has the gold makes the rules, also known as he who pays the piper calls the tune. What better way to control the world and control people's way of thinking and control and guide people to your worldview and effectively become the ruler of the world without appearing to be, but by controlling the money flow and controlling the people who affect policy in the various countries around the world. And here's another little key here. This should have come as no surprise to any of us, because if back in just before the 2015 election, Lord Christopher Monckton, he is a climate change critic, and agree or disagree with him, I don't really care. He says he has been known to say some rather out there things, but this is rather interesting here, and I've highlighted it. He remembers, and he talks to a conversation when Sir David King, William Hague's United Kingdom climate change ambassador, was asked by the Environmentalist Committee of the British House of Commons in May of 2014 whether all the nations of the world were in principle ready to sign their people's rights away in such a treaty. And they're talking about now some kind of climate change treaty at this point. And the response was, oh, yes, but there are still there are two standouts. One is Canada, but don't worry about Canada. They've got an election in the spring. Now, they were wrong there because the election was in October, fall of 2015. They've got an election in the spring of 2015, and we and the UN will make sure that the president government is removed. The UN and us, we and the UN, will make sure that the present government is removed. And that was before, that occurred back in 2014. What does that tell you? This was engineered. This was engineered by the UN. This was engineered by their puppets around the world who are hell-bent on draining money from your and my pocketbooks and transferring that money to their pet projects around the world. This was engineered by the Liberal Party of Canada in cahoots with people like George Soros, who wants to control the world, by the look of it, through governments that, if they don't do what he wants them to do, well, that's fine. He'll just stop giving them money. And he'll stop giving his organizations that back these governments and target and attempt to influence how people vote, his support, his financial support. So what does this say? This says that we are in a situation where we're going to have to really seriously work together and make sure that we, the citizenry of this country, stand up to this kind of thing, think critically. And when I say think critically, I mean get all the information and make up your own mind. If somebody comes to your door with a pamphlet with all kinds of information on it, you can accept it or refuse it, but think about and consider the source. Is the source a legitimate, unbiased source, or is the source of this information some organization with an axe to grind, or with an agenda to push, or with some other approach that they want to have, cause that they're advocating for? And that applies both to the left and to the right. So that applies to myself as much as it applies to Lead Now and anything else that George Soros sends money to. So think critically about what I say. Think critically about what anybody says. As always, ask why, get your own ideas in place, and vote with your conscience. And don't let anybody or any group of people with lots of money to spend influence you. And if this has been happening, this is highly illegal, this is highly unethical, and you need to remember, and this is unbiased here, if all of this that I've said is true, and it seems to be, just because when you follow the money, it all leads back to the same place. If this is true, think about who the beneficiary was of this. Think about who got screwed over because of this. And think about what this means about Justin Trudeau and how ethical this man really is. He's the worst prime minister that we've ever had, and I include his father in that list. So think about that. And when the next election comes around, let's do something to fix it. Let's get rid of this guy before he makes this country any worse than it already is. And that's it for me. I've had the link up on the screen for a while now. If you like what you see, if you want to give me a hand here, you want to improve the technology I'm using, you want to do the whole bit, please do consider giving me support over on Patreon. You can also find me on minds.com, minds.com. And I'll throw that link up really quick here as well. And consider subscribing to the podcast. There is going to be some extra perks for those who do decide to subscribe, and it can be as little as $1 a month, and that's not going to break the bank for most of us. So give that some thought. I'm not going to force you to. It's never expected. It's always appreciated. So that's it for me, and I'll be back on Friday, and I'll talk to you then.